500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers..."
G'day, this is Expand the Phantom Podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com, and you can subscribe to our podcast via YouTube or through your favourite podcast apps. Do not forget to give us a rating on your podcast app and tell a mate about us. This episode 225, we are going to revisit one of our most beloved Phantom individuals who would be top three most influential Phantom people in the whole world, in the whole history, and that is none other than Cy Barry. And with Cy Barry, we also have his son, David, who we're going to be asking some questions as well, because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who want to ask David some questions as well. So enough of me. Let's introduce the legend himself. Cy, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thanks. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. And David, you're off to the side there. We could see an arm or a how are you as well?
I'm great, thank you.
No worries. Well, look, really appreciate you guys joining us. It's just going to be myself talking to you today. So, but in these type of interviews, less of us and more of the guest is always a better idea. So, how's everything going over in America and everything like that? Post COVID, how's it all going?
Well, it seems pretty well handled at this point. There are some spikes now and then, but things are all right. Unfortunately, we're running into a bit of inflation economically, but it's not hurting me too badly. But I'm still enjoying life, and still doing some artwork and getting wonderful commissions from fans and very nice comments. I'm very excited about the fact that they still remember me, and very grateful too. And thank you so much, all of you Australians. And I loved being there. I was there twice with my wife, and we enjoyed the reception that we got. And I think your best product are your people. I think I've mentioned that before, but I enjoy them very much, and made a lovely dinner for me and my wife, and we were overwhelmed, just delighted by our visits.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed that one. The last time you were here, I think it was would have been probably about
2008.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed that one. So I've never actually had the privilege of meeting you face to face. But the beauty about the internet and today's society is that we can still be in our rooms many thousand k's away, and it's always a pleasure talking to you, Cy. We've done this twice. You can listen to us on episode 53 and 113. This is going to be our first one via video, which is interesting. I think last time we ran into some troubles with the video, so really appreciate you. You're looking very good. You're looking very healthy, very fit. You're looking amazing. I'm loving to see the photos and everything as well that you do online.
Right. I don't know if you saw an item that had been in the Boston papers, in the Massachusetts papers, an item about during my retirement, I was teaching class in this residence that I'm living in, and there were a couple of articles about me during that time, and I was really just so surprised. I didn't realize that this was being done on the first occasion. On the second occasion, they had some reporters from the newspapers, and they made a even larger presentation. Oh, wow. So I'm not yet forgotten. I'm glad for that.
No, in the fandom community, you'll never be forgotten. Like you said, there's a huge contingent in Australia, but also, all throughout the world, in India and Scandinavia, especially
And
as well.
especially, yeah.
We've got a lot of Indian listeners, and they love your work. They with the Intergel comics, absolutely love your work with the colors and everything as well. So yeah. So we've got a few questions, but we don't have a lot. We just wanted to kind of let the conversation
Mhm.
flow.
Okay.
So I guess we'll go into some questions, and then we'll kind of go from there. Now, first up, we did have some questions regarding the NFT, but we're not going to ask those questions here. We might look at doing something a little bit later, because we know we've got some people that are very intrigued by that. So don't be disappointed if we don't ask about that or talk about that in this podcast, because we're going to try and do something a little bit more focused, but about that as well. But one of the things that really intrigued myself, as a young fan reading the late Ed Rhodes and Pete Clous's magazines,
Yeah.
was the article about Joe Gilia. Now
Giella.
Giella, sorry,
Right.
I appreciate you correcting me on that one. Um,
Right.
he was one of your assistants, and I love that article that they wrote about him. And then doing some research, I found a couple of other names. So I'm just going to start from one end, and I was just hoping you can just tell us a little bit about them, how you met them, a little bit about their work, just because some fans don't know about them, and I
Right.
always so first one is George Olson. From my research, he did work for you between 1962 to 73, and then 1979 till when he finished on the strip in
Yeah.
2005.
Hmm. That's
Could-
right. No, what he finished on the strip when?
from what?
2005, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I left the strip in '94 and continued it.
yep,
He did the pencils, and Keith Williams did the inks on it. So that was back in '94.
yep.
So you
So
was it 28 years?
Yeah.
28 years.
hmm.
Yeah.
So did he do a number of roles for you? Did he? What was his main role that he did for you? Was it just helping out whenever he could, or?
You talk about Olson?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Yes. He did layouts for me. I tightened it, and then I tightened up the pencils and inked it as well. Sometimes Joe would pitch in on the inking sometimes too.
Now, for those who don't know, could you explain to us what a layout is?
It's a rough pencil. It gives the in my case George it's just a very rough pencil. It's not finished at all, and it's based just basic unfinished pencils. And then I mean, he'll draw the characters, he'll draw them, but I'll correct them and make them look like the characters that I draw. And
Yep.
I put my own style into it too in my pencil. So
Okay.
I don't let his figure drawing is quite good. So I don't have too much trouble correcting it. And the less that I had to correct, the better it was for me. And I enjoyed repenciling over his pencils, and that gave me the style that I wanted. If anyone inked it for me, but most of the stuff I did ink myself. There were times when I wanted to get ahead on the strip, and I'd have Joe work on it with me.
Okay, cool.
So he, as far as Joe is concerned, I'll give you a little background about that. I met Joe when I was 16 years old, 15 or 16, back in art school, School of Industrial Art. Industrial Art was the school, and it was in Manhattan on 79th Street. And there were four of us that became very good friends. It was Joe Giella and Al Scaduto and Emilio Squiglio. These are four guys that really got to be very close friends, and we'd have dinners out together and what have you. And Joe, as a result, began working very young at Timely. At that time, it was called Timely, which was Marvel Comics. And now, and he worked in the bullpen, and I worked freelance for DC and a little bit for Marvel, but most of our work was with DC. So Joe, he's still alive, he's still around, and he has been doing some Batman things for fans, commissions, or what have you, and he's doing well. But he was my closest friend, Joe, and
Oh, wow.
this guy Dudo, who did They'll Do It Every Time, did a wonderful strip. So four of us, very close, all through our lives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It was a wonderful friendship for many years. I think well over 70 years that we were friends.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I thank you for sharing that with us. Another name I've got here, and again, I'm sorry if I'm going to pronounce the last name incorrect, is Bob Forgione.
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 Bob Forgione.
No worries, I appreciate that. So from what I can gather, he helped out between 1962 to 1965.
62 to 65, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He lived in Westchester, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did he do? So what did he help you with?
Well, he did the layouts too.
Okay.
He did and I tightened them up and inked them.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I was inking it myself at that time.
Yeah. So again, some of us know this, some of us don't. You inked everything throughout the whole 30 odd years that you worked on the strip. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I say, sometimes Joe helped me.
Yeah.
During rush periods, and then for a while, for about a year and a half, he worked steadily with me.
Okay.
And it was a very good relationship. His ink, he tried to bring it around as close to my style as he could, and it was slightly different, but we can't all imitate each other perfectly. So he had a little of his own technique, which was fine with me. It still had the same dramatic effect that I wanted.
Yeah, and just in the average person would not be able to tell that you've had that he inked for you, and I know as before I knew more, before I researched more, it amazed me that your style was exactly the same for the 30 odd years and everything. So it's a credit to yourself, but also to your colleagues as well.
Thank you.
Another one here is George Russo.
Oh, George Russo. Yeah, he did backgrounds for me. I would do the figure. I mean, I would pencil and ink figures, and he would help me with the backgrounds. Right.
And so background, that's things like the jungle.
In other words, I inked, the jungles, the huts in the jungle, and it was Africa. So and there were homes as well. There were cities during the time of the strip. So there were developed cities, but there are more obsolete areas too that the Phantom visited. And he was commander of the Jungle Patrol, which is another phase of the Phantom story. But he was called the commander, and he gathered them as a group. They were a group of pilots who he was first trying to recover a princess from their capture, and he managed to fight them all. He managed to fight them, and this was their way of returning her back to him. He had to defeat each one of them, and before he could take her back. One of these real exciting pirate kind of stories. And he did defeat all of them, and as a matter, so then he returns the princess, and she's so in love. She fell in love with him. She wants to marry him, but he wasn't ready yet. It took a long time for him to be ready, like 40 years of comics, but he finally met he had a girlfriend, Diana, and he finally married her.
Yeah.
But the stories during that period of working with George Russo's, he also was a bit of a photographer, and he would take pictures, and I would be using these pictures with nice, exciting lighting effects, and I'd use those figures that he took, those pictures, and use them for the Phantom. I would change the body, but make them more bulky. But I would I use those photographs very, very effectively to get some of the lighting, the drama, and which made it a bit different looking and more exciting looking, having the wonderful shadows and deep blacks here and there, and having the effect of more mystery than it had before.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always loved about your work was the shadow work as well. So I really enjoyed hearing about that. I suppose these days we use Google Images, but
That's right. But there are poses where you just can't find those poses. Poses of the body doing something like leaping and or diving at another person, or there's some action shots that you just have to make up yourself. You have to know how to draw the figure. You have to know the anatomy and be able to put that figure in different positions. But there were times when George would where I would pose, and George would make it look like I was flying in the air. He had a way of setting me up so it looked like I was leaping off a wall or off a bridge or whatever. But I worked with many guys who did many different things to make the script look more interesting.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that. I've seen some actual photos of Wilson McCoy using his family as posers.
Yes.
So it's
yes.
Yeah, it's amazing listening to you with Joe and some of the other colleagues doing that as well. So right. Yeah. David, did you ever get yourself? Were you ever a pose or a live action?
No, he didn't use me. I think I was too little.
Look at how big he became, though.
Yeah, but I got bigger, but at the time, I think I was probably too small.
Yeah.
So you never
but I remember working. I don't know if it was for free or if you paid me, but I used to catalog. We used to go through the National Time magazine, Life magazine, National Geographics, and we cut out interesting scenes, and we had it all cataloged and in alphabetical order. And he used all of this background material for new ideas.
Oh wow! That's
right.
So that you would have had quite a collection.
filing cabinet that was about 5 feet high. of just cutouts. So I remember helping him with that.
Right.
And that was a lot of fun.
And I use it for research for different unusual faces and characters, so I could develop characters around these faces. And so it was interesting work. And the amount of files that I had to keep for foreign nations and foreign architecture, and so it covered many fields, planes of the earliest planes, way up, well up to the jets, the jet fighters and what have you. So I had to keep on research.
Yeah, and the thing with the Phantom is that you're drawing stories in a 400-year arc, so you're having to keep stuff
Right,
from.
right. That's another unusual thing, right?
Yeah,
So I had to go way back in history, the old wooden ships, and with multi sails on them, and all of this stuff you need research for.
Yeah.
Now I hardly even need files because I can go right to the computer and get anything I want.
Yeah,
Different angles too, and it's just unusual the amount of research that's out there and easy to obtain. Incredible. So I don't have to load up my shelves and my files with all the reference that I need.
yeah.
And of course, having been retired now, I'm not working from script, so I don't have to do that kind of research anymore. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that Jungle Patrol story that we were talking about before. That's one of probably my all-time favorite story of yours. It's amazing. It's an amazing story. The action, the drawing, the fight scenes between the four guys, and then rescuing the princess and all that. So
Right. Right.
Yeah, it was.
Redbeard was quite that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, he was an amazing character.
Yeah. And he finally is finally down on the ground, finally defeated. So he had to defeat, I think, 4 of them.
Yes.
A Frenchman and a black guy and who else
Crusher.
was it?
Crusher.
Redbeard.
So there was
yes,
Crusher, the big guy.
Crusher. Absolutely, he was an Asian, right? He was the Asian Crusher, right?
Yeah. Yeah, amazing.
And they actually started the Jungle Patrol. I put them into 17th, 16th, no, 18th century costumes during the French Revolutionary during the 1700s. Yeah.
Yep. The big puffy shoulders and.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I love that story. I still read it quite regularly, and it's just full of little moments and bits and stuff like that. So, thank you for creating that classic, which even now that was created in the 70s, so that's almost 50 years ago. Fans are still enjoying it now.
Oh, right. Good.
Now another person, Don Heck. From 1972 to 1973.
Oh, he only did a couple of weeks for me at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. It was only he was in my National Cartoonist group. He was one of the members on Long Island, and he had a lot of skill. He was very fast pencil, and he did some layouts for me, and I tightened them up and inked them. He worked. Then he was kind of out of work when I took him on, and after he worked for me, he used the work that he did for me and brought them around to different comic book publishing companies.
Oh wow!
And he began to work. Got some work from DC and mostly from Marvel, actually.
Yeah.
So the artists that worked with me, who might have been new, or maybe needed a little extra work, having shown my work, the work that they did for me, they were able to get work in the field because of my association with these publishers. They knew that if I took them on, it must be pretty good.
Yeah,
So, They were able to get work as a result of working with me.
Yeah, that must be fulfilling that you helped a lot of these, and I think we're about halfway through, but you helped their careers and helped them out. That must be fulfilling.
Yes, wonderful feeling, really. And Jose Delpo, do you know that name?
Yes, I've got that one down here as 1979.
What is that? You
Um,
got
my research shows that he did some assisted you in 1979.
Oh, yes, right. Hmm. Yeah, it was just a few months. I think he only helped me a few months at the time, and then we began to get some work as a result. Another guy that began to get some work. I think he got some work in DC at the time. He started to get small stories, and then he got to be known. He was a he moved out of the state. I think he lived in New Jersey, and he moved down to Florida, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another guy that made it and was able to continue working in the field.
And so was that layouts for you as well?
Yes, right.
Yeah. Oh wow. So I've got another one here, John Rosenberger.
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 Oh yeah, good old John. Remember him? Yeah. Unfortunately, he died of cancer. But he worked with me for about 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also did some layouts too.
Yeah. Wow. And then the one that probably one of my favorites, I've seen some of his other work, is Andre LeBlanc.
Oh yeah. Wonderful artist. Yeah, and a very, very bright guy. Just a great individual. And he himself was doing religious books. Historic books and mostly Bible stories. And he had a very nice style. His inking was a little heavy for my for what I would have liked, but he had a good style, and he knew how to draw the figure and how to ink the figure. So once in a while I'd use him for inking, or he would switch over to some layout. So he kind of varied it. And I did a little Bible work with him, a little of the Bible pamphlets with him too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did not know that. So
yeah.
So is that again just helping out when he needed help, or
right. But very little, because my script took a lot of time.
Yeah, I can imagine there wouldn't have been much.
And some of it was when I was in comic books before I got onto the Phantom. That was during the 50s.
Yeah, I do want to ask a little bit about that, because that intrigues me a lot as well. I've got two more names though, if that's okay. Rick Buckler.
Buckler. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. He came to me with his wife and two little. His wife was pregnant, and he had a little boy with him. They were just beginning their family, and he was very young. And but I was kind of young myself at that time. I think that was during the late 60s or early 70s. But he only did a couple of stories for me. Then he started to get some work as a result. I guess he made copies of the work he was doing for me and brought it around. He started to get some work.
Okay, and the last number I have, or the last name, sorry, is Frank Springer.
Oh yeah, he there too. He did about 2-3 weeks for me. Yeah, he was quite an artist too. He also belonged to our National Cartoonist Society group.
Yeah,
many of them. In fact, I finally got John Buscema to get onto our group. into our group. He lived on the island too, and it took quite a while. He was kind of reticent about joining. I don't know why, but we kept encouraging him, and finally he joined us, and we were so happy that he did.
Mm.
And then so sadly, he developed cancer and passed away.
Mm.
But wonderful guy, really very friendly and delightful to be with. He was quite a guy and quite an artist.
So it
You know,
seemed,
you must know the name, right?
I do know the name. Yeah, look,
He did Thor and Kanan the Terrible,
yeah.
Conan the Terrible, and Thor and many other characters. So Silver something, Silver
Oh,
Surfer.
Silver Surfer. Yep, yep.
Yeah, he did that.
Yeah,
And he
wow.
everyone claimed him to be a copy of Jack Kirby, but he was more than that. He had his own style and his own technique. But his figures were as exciting as Jack Kirby. They were.
Mm. So a few of these names, so you were just saying about how they came to you from in the group, the Art Association of New York.
Right.
So these are all like up and coming guys who are trying to break into the field. They join the group to connect with people, and obviously they connected with you, and you were gracious enough to be able to, I guess, help them get their foot in the door and everything. Is that basically how it went?
Yes, basically. But many of them I knew. Many, I'd say two, at least three of them I knew already. The others I hadn't known. On a couple of occasions, my friends referred these new guys to me. The ones that people that I was already relating to, they would recommend young guys coming in. And they said, "This guy's pretty good. I think he's great on layouts. And this guy was a good background man and ether, So I was doing some other work on the side as well as the strip, but the strip kept me busy almost full time.
Yeah, doing dailies and Sundays, and in the high detail you did it. Yeah, you. How many hours were you pulling a week to be able to stay on top of it all?
Oh, I think about, so I would say about 12 hours a day, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Probably.
Yeah,
Anyway,
wow.
10,
more than
10, maybe 12, and sometimes 4. Sometimes I go late into the night.
Late into the night.
Yeah.
You were a night.
I was really a night person, right?
Okay, yeah. No, that's so was that 7 days a week, or did you work extra so you can have like a weekend?
I tried. I would work on Saturday a good part of the day, and then stop around 4 o'clock. And Sunday I try to take off. Sunday I try to take off as often as I could.
Yeah.
Unless I had a very tough week of drawing, where there was a lot of work in it, which Lee had a habit of doing. The more I asked him to ease up, the more junk he put in there. And well, I don't like talking about him, but I don't enjoy telling stories about him. But I had a difficult time with him. It was very difficult to deal with. So many times I would have like he would throw armies into the story, and I'd have to draw all these figures with their weapons and their cut and their uniforms,
Yeah.
And it took like 1.5 times the time to do a week of work because of all the figure work I had to do. Really, a lot of added work. They weren't simple open panels.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always needed help, because he overwrote. He wrote too many complicated scenes. He tried to have three different actions going on in one panel instead of something between just one person and another. So they always throw in another person and then trying to show them debating and arguing and then fighting. It was just he just loaded up my work a great deal. But I got
But in
through
the
it.
end-
But I see that more people have been attentive to me than they have to Lee. I've been hearing this from people who knew Lee and interviewed him, and or interviewed his wife after he died, and she admitted that she doesn't get very much mail anymore. She was getting mail in to find out about his life story and things like that, and she was getting less and less mail. So I'm very grateful that I'm still getting a great deal of attention, people writing or people getting onto. We have our own website, and
Yes.
David tells me of commissions that are asked of me, and it keeps going on. So
Yes.
I'm very grateful that I have this audience still alive.
Yeah, like as we said at the beginning, you know, fans still rave about you, still love your work. There's a lot of childhood memories you've made, whether it's from cutting out the newspaper strips, getting the latest free comic or
So many people did
comic,
this.
and you should be very proud of what you've done. You've fulfilled a lot of
Absolutely.
So did you know of your fame when you were doing the
No.
strip, or was it
I
more
had no idea.
afterwards?
It wasn't until I visited these countries that I realized how famous I was. I had no idea. I was overwhelmed. I went to Australia first in '98.
Yeah.
I had retired in '94, and I was invited there to a dinner, and to stay at one of my fans' house. We stayed there for a while, and oh no, we stayed at a hotel there. The following 10 years later, we stayed at the house of he became a very dear friend.
That Richard?
That Richard Fry. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. We stayed at his house. They actually gave me their bedroom, and they slept in another room. They wanted me to be in a more comfortable room, and they treated us just beautifully. And we were there for about 2 weeks. And I said, please, I don't want to abuse our invitation, our visiting. So they said, but if you leave, then I'll be abused. He was a wonderful guy. He and his wife, just wonderful. And his son Daniel visited us too. Remember?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So and I've seen Richard here. He's come here and visited. So we've developed a wonderful friendship.
Yeah.
And that's they call it the Lee Falk Explorers.
Yes,
Club.
Lee Falk. Yep. Lee Falk Bengalas Explorers Memorial Club. Yes.
Yeah,
or
right.
the Olympic, because it's a little bit easier to say than China and Street.
Right.
So David, what was it like growing up and seeing your dad drawing every day? Did you understand it, or did you realize just how?
No. No, he didn't really know.
And it's funny, I really didn't follow it that closely. I mean, it was such a part of despite the fact that it was such a big part of our lives, my dad's work, because the whole family was involved in one way, shape, or form. I mean, we were either cataloging background material, or we were driving his artwork into New York City to drop it off with the King Features, or we were erasing, we were doing work for him. But despite all of that, I really had no idea how widespread the Phantom popularity was. And I absolutely had no idea that my dad was so well known.
Yeah.
Nor
So
did I know about his history. It's almost like, they say that very often people who are in the, who've been to war don't like to talk about their experiences. I feel like my dad didn't really talk that much about his background, to me anyway. Maybe my sisters were more familiar with what my dad had done during the late 40s or 50s and early 60s before the Phantom.
Yeah.
I don't think I was really unaware of his work with DC and Marvel and the romance work that he did and the westerns that he worked on. And I just had no idea. He never. I think even he forgot about the Martin Luther King
yes.
book that he drew, and so I had very little insight into the popularity of the Phantom and popularity of my dad until the royalty checks came in every month. Then it was a happy time around the house. Oh, payday.
Yeah. Okay.
So but I had no idea of my dad's background of work. Nor did I really understand the impact that the Phantom was having on so many people.
Yeah. So when did you find out about your dad's legendary status? Like when did it really set in for you?
Probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, just about 10 years ago, when some of the Phantom Facebook pages, when I was introduced to some of them, when I spent a little more time with Pete Klaus and Ed Rhodes. I went to a couple of the Sardi's lunches, and I just started to learn more about what my dad's involvement with the strip and how he was so admired. And so it's really been pretty recent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it's fascinating hearing you talk about that, because from a fan's perspective, we see him as royalty. Like his. We once did a podcast on the most influential Phantom people in the whole history, and I think he was one or two, just because of what he brought to the strip with and everything like that. And then it's interesting talking to his son, where you don't see him as royalty, you just see him as dad.
Right, I just saw him as dad.
Right. So he had, young people have. I mean, especially during their teens and the early years, they're caught up in their own lives, and they need to make a place for themselves, and they're dealing with their own individual problems, and they don't really. They're not at a stage where they're trying to find out what their fathers did more intimately. They know that the father. He knew his father was an artist, and he saw the work I was doing, but he didn't know what I didn't even know how much I incurred in the way of the fans and the attention that was out there about me. I had no idea until I retired and got out there and found out, going to these different countries, Scandinavia and Australia, and it was a whole new enlightenment to me. So I couldn't expect David to have been very informed, because I was very, very lightly informed. I had no idea, really.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And it's intriguing.
Now I just love meeting new people and talking to new people online, and
it's very interesting.
Catching up on my dad's body of work.
Yeah, and we've made mention of it a little bit before. Like until recently myself, and I will admit I'm a Phantom fan, not a comic fan in a sense, but I didn't know of your history with DC and Marvel or anything like that as well. So, you know, following your Facebook, the Facebook page, I think it's the Cyber fan group page is probably the best one if you want to learn more about
Yeah,
the past work and stuff like that.
right.
So could you tell us a little bit about your, you know, you've mainly done work for DC, but you've also done work for Marvel as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I first worked with Julie Schwartz, one of the main editors up there. And I did some science fiction and some mystery stories, mostly those, and a little bit of Western work too for Julie. And then from there, I switched. There was another publisher who handled the war stories. I did a couple of those stories for him.
Oh, wow.
And but I really loved. I finally got into the romance area, and I began to like that. It gave me a chance to draw more women and develop a style for them. And I was drawing mostly men, very few of them women in my previous work. This gave me a chance to go full circle and showing children as well as women, and not just bulky super people, you know. And that romance area I seem to have found a niche there. And while I was doing that, then I got a call from Keith Features. But during that time, I was also helping my brother Dan on Flash Gordon. I was pitching in now and then to help him on the deadline. So they knew me when I would go up there and deliver work up there. So they got to know me. And as a result, while I was working at DC, I got a call that Wilson McCoy, that he was in the hospital, and they asked me if I could pitch in. They knew my work. They knew some of the things I did for Dan, so they were able to, they acknowledged that I probably could handle it. So they gave me a week of script, and I did a week of script. And they called me. They said, "Cy, it looks beautiful." He said, "But it looks like Flash Gordon. It doesn't look like McCoy's work." So they said, "We've got time. Could you do another week?" I don't know what I thought I saved that week of work because they didn't need it, but they paid me for it. But
That's nice.
I did another, and then I had to really simplify. That was more difficult than doing much more difficult, because what I had to do was I had to de-illustrate. I had to be less of an illustrator. I had to make it that simplistic style that he used, and I was always offended by it. I just couldn't accept it as a kind of style that befits a Phantom story. And I remember when I was younger, and McCoy was working on it at the time. I would say, you know, if I ever get into comics, I would love to do that Phantom strip. I must have been in my early teens then, very early teens. And I always had the desire. I wanted to be an illustrator, but when I would look at that script, I'd say, "Wow, that's a good story, but what the artwork is not really doing much for it, you know." And I had visions of what I would do. I'd get more drama, more expression in the Phantom. And he always had this stone face, this one expression. Even when he was supposed to laugh, he didn't really have a laugh, you know. So sure enough, when I did get the script, and I couldn't believe it, those were the first things I did after I got out of McCoy's style, and I was able to introduce my own style in there very slowly. Then I began to give more expressions to the Phantom, and I mean, when he'd be serious, I would really get an angry look, and I would even expand the expression in the mask too.
Yeah, with the eyebrows.
Make a small slit with the eyes and a real angry look, you know. And then of course adding the blacks and giving the drama, that's what it really needed. I mean, it's an adventure strip. It looked more like a romance strip, you know. When McCoy did it, it just seemed so light in its finished technique. It needed some more blacks and drama and shadows, you know, things that make that kind of a strip more exciting and more demanding. You know, more people want to see it more.
Mm.
So,
I was just gonna ask, when you were talking about your romance and stuff like that your Diana, I had a crush on her as a child, and I'm sure there's a lot of other fans out there that had a bit of a crush on her as well. Was she ever modeled on anyone, or
is she what? Was she
was
what?
was Diana? Did you model her off someone that you knew, or?
Oh yes, I did. Smith, the one who was in Charlie's Angels, Jacqueline Smith.
Okay, yeah, wow.
Fashioned her hairstyle and somewhat her appearance too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
She
the
caught
way
my
you
eye. Yeah.
the way you drew Diana, did that help with like what you're talking about, like with doing the romance stories and being able to draw, you know, an attractive women and
Yeah,
and
right.
stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did use. I used to use the photography magazines to see. They had some wonderful lighting on the figures. You know, women figures and different styles, clothing styles, that the upcoming clothing styles. I kept reference on that, but I would use magazines to get the reference from.
Yeah.
And more and more, I began to see more how to make a woman more delicate than I did draw them. At one point, I was drawing them a little hard and a little harsh, and I learned how to make them look softer. But that was during the comics days, during my comics days, and dealing with the romance magazine.
Yeah. Wow. So, like, you know, and I'm not sure if this is going to be the fansome or not, but what was your favorite? Like, do you have like a favorite job or a favorite story or like a favorite character or something that you've ever drawn?
There were several. Well, a favorite character? I thought you meant the favorite.
Yeah, or just any. Yeah, any favorites?
Yeah. There was a western that I liked. Oh, I did like. As a matter of fact, there was a few stories that I worked on with Dan, where I was doing some layouts for him on this newspaper. So much as I had a very difficult time with my brother, really very difficult times. I must admit that he was a brilliant artist, and I bring him up only because of the artwork he did, and he got a great deal of attention at DC. I mean, he was a fair-haired guy up there, and they had other people following his style, and they wanted some more of his technique in their books too. So that's why I bring him up. And there was a publishing outfit, a story that we did about a newspaper editor, Big Town was called, and I love that character. I loved working on that character because I was doing my early layouts for him at the time, so I like doing it. But let me see. I would say the best thing that I enjoy drawing. But you wanted to know before the Phantom, right?
Oh, it could be the Phantom. It could be before.
Phantom was my favorite.
Yeah.
Absolutely my favorite. That's a final answer. That the best character that I really enjoyed drawing was the Phantom. I love the background. I love where he's from. The kind of character he was real. The story about having lived 400 years was just an assumption by the tribes, because each phantom that passed on handed it over to his son, so he was able to keep the story, keep the story generations alive by handing each generation over. So I just like the way the league set up the stories. Professionally, he was a wonderful writer.
Yeah. So besides I just wanted to make mention. One of the things that a lot of fans, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but a lot of the things that a lot of fans really, really liked was that the Phantom could crack a smile in your stories. They call it the smiling Phantom.
Right.
And it just reminded me of when you were talking before about how you put emotion into your Phantom, how he can
Yes,
take
I
a
did.
smile. And
It was very important to me.
And so I just wanted to let you know that, that, like I said, the term the smiling phantom or size
Oh.
smiling phantom. So
Oh,
I
that's
just,
fun. Right.
yeah, I just thought, it's one thing that a lot of fans
I
do
mean, let's
comment.
remember, he was a human being. He wasn't a statue, and he wasn't just a symbol. He was a living human being who had emotions when he was angry, when he was upset, and when he was very happy, and also when he was very tender with his kids. That kind of those emotions should be displayed. You can't just have somebody reacting with no expression.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought I did. I put expression and human feelings into the strip as well as the drama.
Yeah. So one thing I'm not sure if you are aware, for a lot of creators, they've been told, okay, you're going to draw the Phantom, but there's one rule: there has to be a Cybari Phantom. So I'm not sure if you are aware, but for many generational creators, ever since you've been drawing it, have been instructed to draw their Phantom like yourself.
Right. Oh, nice.
So, like, you've got the Fratelli Sparta, which is the Italian publisher. You've got and even now, like, there's a young bloke, Jeremy McPherson, who draws very, yeah. And so, even now, you've been retired since '94. Yeah,
Felmang, yes, right.
So you've been retired for almost 30 years, and you're still influencing a lot of.
What do you think of the True magazine interpretation?
What do I think of it?
Yeah, I'm interviewing you now.
Look, Glenn and Dudley, I think, look, it's not easy publishing a comic these days, especially with the internet and stuff like that. I like what they're doing. There's some things that I think they could do better, but overall, I think they do great. One thing I did love was what Jim Shepard did by reprinting all your stories, but also Ray Moore's and Wilson McCoy's in their unedited format. I really thought that gave a really good importance, especially in the the 80s and the 90s, when he put a real focus on that. That was when I started becoming a fan. It was when I got to see all your artwork in unedited format and in its pure state, in its unadulterated state, and it's what made me, fall in love with it. Was seeing it like that. I really like the new paper that Fru's doing as well. It makes it a lot crisper and stuff as well. Yeah. Yeah, and so I'm not sure if that if that answers your question or not. What do you think? Do you have copies of your artwork or of your stories?
Right after I retired for quite a few years, they sent me issues, and the earlier years that they were sending me issues had reproductions of my work.
Yes.
And it went on for a few years, and then it dropped off. My work dropped off, and other artists did it. And I kind of felt it lost at the beginning, there was some artists right after I retired whose work began to look stronger and a little more like mine, because it had been a little weak before that. And then it became a little stronger, and I saw they were getting more blacks into it, more drama. And it was looking pretty good for a period of time. And then after they stopped publishing my work as well as what they were doing, that style, that technique began to be less and less. And what was happening, I was getting, I thought that if I were an editor, I would correct what was happening. It seemed like they were putting much detail into the figures and the backgrounds, and in almost every panel, you didn't know where your eye didn't know where to look. Every panel, every composition should have a specific area in the composition that the eye should be brought to, that the writer and the artist want to bring the attention to the audience, to the reader. And what was happening, there was so much work in the art, in the figure as well as the background. There was nothing simplified so that you can see, just look at one area and see the detail there, and your eye not being pulled to different parts of the panel. And it's a big mistake with many artists, and this is what we learn in comic books, to try to simplify, because it's also colored. And when you have colored work, so on top of all of that crosshatch and grays and excess work and detail on it, it's so distracting. It draws the eye away from it, and I think it's very hurtful to the script, to the artwork, to the story itself, the storyline, because it's very difficult to read something that's so covered with so much detail. And simplicity is really so vital in artwork, knowing how to simplify and where to simplify.
I find it interesting talking to you about that, because one of the things I love about your work is the detailed backgrounds and the jungle foliage. It wasn't just little bubbles and stuff like that. You drew the veins in leaves and it drooping and the water coming off it, and that was one of the things that I loved about your work, is that it actually looked like a jungle. It felt like you were in there, and then and then talking to you about, and then you making mention of how you got to simplify it. It blows my mind a little bit.
It's so vital. I mean, when you look at work like the Samas, you had a way of drawing the attention to the main figure. You had things pointing to all the time. You always had a composition pointing to the main action. And if there was a main action, you try to keep it open in the background and not confuse it. Well, you don't have to throw background into every single scene, and the background should be far less detailed than the figures themselves.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the way some artists don't have the composition eye to learn how to draw something simply around the figure, so that the backgrounds don't confuse with the figure, and you see the main action of just the figures themselves.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. I really appreciate you telling me that.
This is more of an art lesson than
well, fans will. Yeah, no, fans will really appreciate it. Now, you talked about some of the things that you enjoyed drawing. With the Phantom, is there something that was, I guess, for a lack of a better word, the worst thing you could ever draw in a Phantom story?
The worst thing?
Yeah.
That I could draw in the Phantom. Yeah, armies.
Armies.
The Phantom dealing with whole armies and having his force his own jungle patrol trying to set off the armies that are attacking or natives attacking, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anything that had an enormous amount of figures or mechanical work that had to be done in duplicates and triplicates and quadruplicates.
Yeah.
And Lee that was one fault that he had that I thought he was one of the writer, but he drew excessive. He wrote things with excessive elements in it that made it very, very tough to try to get through very easily. That was the worst part of drawing it.
And
Some story would go over break.
I'm thinking of the mysterious ambassador when he first fights General Babubu. There was a lot of soldiers in there. The founding of the Jungle Patrol, there was a lot of pirates and stuff like that. And so I'm picturing all these stories with lots of people in the panels, and I actually loved that because they were all different.
Yeah, they were. I mean, but it was so tough getting through it. I mean, it took so much time, and he
I've got to be
so
reading those stories, and I'm going, oh no, I'm not sure if I can enjoy that anymore because I know that you laboured extra time. And
I really labored on him. Yes, right. At the beginning, it wasn't so bad, but I didn't know how often he would pull this. And it just the fact that he the more I complained about it, the more he poured it on, So this was his personality. I was not to tell him how, well, I'm getting into something that I didn't want to get into. Okay, I really don't want to get into it.
Well, we won't go there then. So who's the favorite? I've got like about one more question, and then I want to talk a little bit about your website, and we'll wind down because I'm wary of time and everything like that. So we'll put aside Lee Falk. We'll talk about who's your most favorite person you have worked with, and that could be in your Marvel DC days or with your assistants. Is there someone that that when you?
I would say George Olson.
George Olson.
Very nice.
What about
Very
like
bright.
the Alex Totes? And...
Well, I didn't work. Oh, I see. In the early days, I did ink other artists' work at DC.
Okay. Yeah.
In the early 50s. And yes, one of my favorite. If you're asking about who I like working with, whose work I like working with, or whose work I appreciated.
Yeah, I guess any of it or all of it.
Well, yeah. Other than Dan's work, who I had a lot of respect for, Alex Toth was one of my favorite artists, I must say. I thought he was a genius in the way he planned panels, his layouts, his he didn't see Marvel had a way of trying to make almost every panel exciting. You have to know when to let up and ease off a little bit and then come back to the excitement again. And they demanded on almost every page, the action, running and the jumping, and the fighting. I like the stories at DC, and I like the way Toth handled them. I like his compositions, his handling of blacks. I learned a lot from it and was able to begin to use it myself. I learned a great deal from him. He's one of my favorite artists. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And he loved my inking on his work too. He always asked for me to work on a particular story of his, and he'd just be disappointed if I wasn't available.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I appreciate you telling us about that.
Were you familiar with Alton?
I know some of his work. Like I said before, I'm not a huge comic fan. I know enough. All I know some. I'm more of a phantom nuffy than I am a comic nuffy, or a nerd. But no, I really appreciate that. You did make mention of George Olson. Was it just because he was a great
It was very nice, a wonderful guy to work with. It was very pleasant, and very accommodating, and he was intellectual. He was well read, and I just liked him as an individual, and he's a very soft-spoken guy, and I thought he was multi-talented too. Knew how to
Yeah.
handle color and knew how to handle all different mediums, and even using markers, working with markers to do roughs for advertising agents. He worked with advertising agents for many years, and I found him as an artist in the agency. I don't remember how he was brought to me, but it was a blessing because he caught on very quickly. He knew exactly what I want, and his layouts were very satisfying to me.
Yeah. Wow. I would love to learn. I really appreciate your time today, because like learning about some of these artists and talking to you again, it's a real highlight. So I appreciate your time today. Now, David, we've talked before about like the website and stuff like that. For those who don't know, cybarry.com, could you tell us a little bit about the website, what's on there, what people can buy, find, and
Sure. We've kept our website. Well, first of all, we did an update to the website about 2 months ago with a new design. And actually, I think I ended up pulling out more material than I put in, just to keep it simplified
Yes.
and more streamlined. So there's three main sections. There's the background about my dad. There's an opportunity to purchase original artwork and a whole host of new prints that are available, as well as merch. Cy Barry branded knickknacks, T-shirts and caps and things like that. And I have a lot of fun with it. I have a lot of fun with that too.
and you
Yeah,
ship over to India, pretty much anywhere anywhere. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of I see a lot of Indian fans who are just as passionate about your
Yeah.
dad's side as what Australians and Scandinavians are. So if you're in India and you've ever wanted to own an original Cy Barry or have some nice prints to put up in your room or in your son's room or something like that, cybarry.com's the place to go.
Yeah, and I think that, while we simplified things on the front end, I think on the back end, what we did was made it more ready for things like online auctions of
Yeah.
the artwork, more video capable. And so these are things that I'm going to be expanding on in the future.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I've purchased artwork from you. Very simple process. It was a great thrill of mine to receive some original artwork. So thank you, David and Cy as well. So make sure you get out there. Every fandom collector should have an original Cy Barry piece of artwork. So wrapping up, because I'm wary of the time and not wanting to keep you forever as much as I would like to be able to talk to you.
It's almost his dinner time.
Yeah, well, I'm getting close to my cocktail time right now.
Cocktail hour
5
too.
o'clock, I join a couple of friends here, and we have I go up to the pub because it's too hot out to sit outside. So we go up to.
Yeah. Is there anything that I don't know I've maybe missed asking you or anything you want to say before we go?
Well, I really enjoy being interviewed, and I enjoy talking about my escapades in the past. And there are some stories, and maybe in the future I could tell some stories about some of the things that went on in comics at DC and Marvel. I have a couple of funny stories to tell about that. One very dramatic story that happened at DC. but we'll continue that at another time. But it's been an exciting career, an exciting life, and I loved every bit of it. I've had some little arguments and qualms and ordeals with publishers, but that too has passed, and we still remember the better parts of our experiences.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Being a cartoonist has been a wonderful life, really.
Yeah, so from myself, and I'm speaking on behalf of every Phantom fan out there who's listening, watching this, thank you, Si, for enriching our lives. I'm glad you're able to understand or see just how much influence you or importance and my life is richer because of your work, and I know there's plenty of others out there whose life is richer as well. So on behalf of everyone, thank you.
Right. Well, you definitely make me feel like I've left some kind of legacy behind that people are enjoying. If I've done that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, and I don't think everyone can say that they've influenced people from all around the world. So I think that should be something you should be very proud of. And David, I think you should be very proud of as well. For what
My pop.
Yeah, definitely am.
So thank you. For those who are listening, you can find us on our website, which is chroniclechamber.com. Our email, if you want to get in touch with us or anything like that, chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can support us on Patreon. We've got new information. Everything is up on there as well. We've got a Phantom Preservation library. So you can look at it there as well, including some articles about Si and everything else as well. You can subscribe to us via YouTube or through your favorite podcast apps, including iTunes or Spotify. Now, as we said at the start, there's been some exciting development regarding NFT and Si Barry. We will look to explore that at a later date. We did not touch upon that in today's chat, but we will be looking to explore that in a little bit more detail later on. So if you've got questions about that or anything like that, make sure you hit us up. We can ask that in advance, or keep an eye on our YouTube, or subscribe to us on one of your podcast apps, and you'll be able to keep up to date with that. So from myself, thank you. Happy Phantoming. Si, David, thank you for your time, and happy Phantoming.
Very welcome. Thank you.
And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds